All right, guys. Good evening. Sorry it took me so long getting on here. It's just a couple minutes after 7. We're going to give people a little bit of time to show up here. Um, Hope you all have been having a good week, considering what's been going on. Going to clean things up here a little bit. Hey, all right. Hi, Rose, and hello, Seraphine. Glad to have you guys aboard tonight. We're going to give people a little bit of time to get here. Uh, We've got a lot of people that are wanting to show up tonight, so we're going to hold off for just a minute. I hope that everybody's had a good week and the weather's starting to cooperate a little bit. Seemed like it was pretty warm out there today, but we're doing pretty good. And tonight we're going to be doing our second lesson. Our first lesson went over pretty well. Hello, Sarah. Good to see you. All right. And hello, Amy. Looks like it might be working for you tonight. All right. We've got 5 views, 5 viewers. We're going to give it just a little bit and let people get here. All right. And while we're waiting for people to show up, we're going to sit back, relax tonight, and learn some things. And while I'm waiting, we're going to go ahead and fix myself a drink. If you care to join me, tonight's drink is Dr. Pepper and Seagram's. Just a little bit more. There we go. As we know, whiskey is the water of life for a lot of people. Glug, 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 glug. And just to let you know, we're doing this because, with everybody being shut down because of what's going on around the world, I thought, well, this would be a good time to get together, make use of my webcam. And I've known people in the Springfield area that can't attend classes physically because of what's going on. So I decided to, go ahead and start something up. Last week we did our lesson 1, Who Were the Druids, which is available now on my YouTube channel, A Pagan Perspective, which we can put a link down for that after we get done with this tonight. Also, last week we did a Druid meditation for healing and peace, which that's up now too, so that you can use it to meditate anytime that life tends to be a pain in the ass and you need something to kind of bolster things and make the situation better. So both of those are currently up, and after this gets done tonight, we'll go ahead and post it on the channel as well. All right, now we've got 7 people. Hello, everybody. And if you want, you can tell your friends to join us. Oh, God, yes. All right. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started and let more people filter in as we go. All right. Last time that we were together, we talked about who the Druids were, what their, how they came across the European landmass, ended up in Ireland, and how the Celtic Society had divided the Druids into the 3 portions of Druid, Bard, and Ovate Seers. And with that, with that part of society being built at that time, you now that you have the distinctions of the Bard, the Ovate, and the Druid, you have to look at Celtic society and say, okay, well, in the spiritual world, what was next? Okay, and a lot of the spirituality that was in that time before Christianity came into Ireland and the UK in general was the idea of the gods. They were very important in Celtic society. The gods were important in many societies because that was our way of, excuse me, delineating things that we didn't understand. You know, it's like from the days of the cavemen, we had the gods of fire, we had the gods of successful hunting and things like that, and you know, that kind of animistic type of worship was the idea that everything that who do we have here? Oh, all right, we got some more people showing up. Good to have you. So it kind of built over time. We started out kind of on this low end of just having one or two gods that were not so specific. They were more generalized. And then as we progressed as humans, we went from the hunter-gatherer societies to agrarian societies. And when we became able to grow our own food and to raise our own livestock, that's when we started to move into the realm of a deeper cultural type of situation with the gods, in that the gods became important for everything. The gods were important for the ideas of fertility in nature with animals and the plant world, because of the things that we were growing, the crops and the apple trees and all these different things. So they became important in that way. And then also it was like a cyclical thing. The worship of the gods influenced society, but then society influenced the worship of the gods in the ways of art, poetry, stories, lore, and so it built up on each other, okay? And as an example, with the Celtic peoples in their various lands, whether it was in Britain or Gaul or Spain or Ireland, it was the idea that that the gods had just as much of an influence on us that we didn't know. Also, the idea of the society was kind of built off of the way that the gods were. As an example, the Celtic peoples were tribal. Okay, when you look at, like I talked before last week in lesson 1, we talked about the differences between Druidic ritual or Druidic practices and Wicca. Okay, and one of the main distinctions between those two is the idea that Wicca tends to be small group oriented, dualistic, in that it functions on the idea of a primal male god and a primal female goddess, the Lord and the Lady. That dichotomy of duality, left and right, light and darkness, that whole kind of thing. And also the differences were that, for the most part, and it still is this way today, is the idea that not only is the Wicca different in that way, but also Druidry tends to be larger group oriented, not so secretive, and that most, not all, there are Druid traditions that aren't necessarily pantheist, but we tend to follow cultural pantheons, whether it's the Saxons for UK proper, the Irish gods for Ireland, and so on and so forth. And you look at tribal society in that they saw their gods as a pantheon, not just a mother and a father, but they saw all of the gods that were encapsulated in that. The mother, the father, the aunt, the uncle, the distant cousins, in that sense. And then each one of those was given a different attribute, a different standing in their culture and their society. And what we're going to take a look at tonight is we're going to go over the gods themselves. We're going to talk a little bit about where they fit in Celtic society, specifically the Irish Celtic society, and what they lend to Druidic practice as compared to other things. And this is, to me, one of the bedstones of Druidic tradition and practice, because everything has to have a something to stand on, a foundation. And without that foundation, everything is very mucky and easily, able to be swashed through, because there's always going to be someone that can dispute it for the most part. But when you look at the foundations of what the Irish had, even the Vikings with the Norse gods, the Greeks, the Romans, that whole 9 yards, all of the great cultures that they built were built on the foundation of worship, of their gods. So, whenever somebody asks, well, what is one of the first places that you want to start with in Irish pantheistic Druidry? You start with the gods. Then you get into the practices that honor them, that honor the ancestors. It all comes back to that. And if you have a strong foundation in who the gods are and what they do, then it's something that will strengthen your practice as you go through the years and give you inspiration for your path. Whether you're a bard, you're going to get inspiration from the gods. Whether you're Druid proper, the rituals that you perform are going to be inspired by the gods. If you're a seer, the things that you envision through ritual and divination are going to be, given to you through impetus of the gods. So it's like, it's not just so much of a universal thing that is over us. It is a pantheistic thing that it encapsulates the earth, us, the ancestors that have died and gone on before us. So it's all interconnected, it's all woven together. And this is the place that you start. So tonight we're going to start, and I've got to grab something here that I've got put together for this. Okay. So when it comes to the gods, for one thing, the name of the pantheon, it is the TuathaDeDannaan, or the TuathaDeDannaan, many different pronunciations, however you want to say it. And basically what that means is the children of Danu. And she is the mother goddess. We'll get to her in just a second. It was believed, and we're going to get into the stories that kind of, in another class, we'll get into the stories that brought the Irish pantheon into Ireland, because there were invasions that happened before the Tuatha were recognized. And so we're going to deal with how those came about and kind of influenced the flow and influx of how the Tuatha became the primary gods of the pagan peoples and the Druids of Ireland at that time. So we start at the beginning, where you have the All-Father, which is the Doida. And it's Doida, Dagda, many different pronunciations, many different spellings, but for this we will go, the spelling is D-A-G-D-A. And he is described as the good God, the father with the red hair, the dozen-fingered king. He is very important in various and sundry stories that are tied to not just Danu, but the Morrigan and other gods. There are many stories. Also, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some books that are tied to lore and stories that pertain to the gods, and we're going to have we're not necessarily going to have a class on that, but I'm going to put something together where we're going to have a Druid bookshelf show, and I'm going to bring out everything that I have, and we're going to talk about the books, because that's another thing, is like I have people always messaging me and leaving me questions. What do I read? Where do I start? Where does it begin? And it's like, okay, well, we can take that, and I will put out a video on some of the books to start with and some of the books not to start with, because there are a bunch of books that are questionable at the least for scholarship on what Druidry is, and some of those you do definitely want to kind of stay away from. The gods have different functions in the way that they operated within the pantheon, the way the people saw them. And one of those was the fact that the Dagda had two great artifacts that were his primeness as being like the king, the leader of the gods. and they were the cauldron called Undri, and he also had a great club that it is said that one end was great and mighty, and he could slow 100 men with one swipe of it, and then the other end was so heavy and tumultuous that he would drag it behind him with that small end on the ground. And it is said that the Dagda walking all over the Emerald Isle is what delineated the boundaries of all the counties, which we'll get into that. We'll get into Sacred Ireland, the boundaries of the various counties, and how there's various sacred places that are set aside to the gods. And so he was very important. Another thing is the cauldron itself was said to be able to bring people back from the dead, especially in times of war. The doctor could place a dead body into the cauldron, and instantly it would revive and come out ready to fight again. There's also those where men who were sick or degenerated from fighting could eat a meal from the cauldron and be made whole from the meal itself. Also, the Druid, being the father of the gods, was tied to certain celebrations during the year. And his two greatest functions for that period is the Dagda is tied heavily to Samhain and also the winter solstice. He is known as the All-Father, the umbrella over all of the other gods. He's the one that kind of keeps things together. He was also known as it was said that the Morrigan had a great sexual appetite that no man or god could sate. Well, he was the only one that was able to lay with the Morrigan and satisfy her sexual lust. No other god or man ever could except for him. And also, as far as the way that whenever we worship the gods, one of the things that he was given was the title of provider of all that we need. Food, water, animals, shelter, the whole 9 yards. The Dagda was the provider of all of those things. Then we go to the All-Mother, Danu, the Earth Mother. And like I said in class last week, when the Keltoi moved across the Eastern European landmass and came west, and developed some of their developed some of their culture. It was said that at one point they had stopped for a while in Germany, and that is where we get the idea of the Danube possibly being named after her, as kind of like a precursor to Danu once the Irish, the Keltoi and the Irish made it into Ireland proper. So even before the Irish land itself was, started, that there was those underpinnings of Celtic society that brought that all together. Danu was also the goddess of fertility, the major goddess, the Earth Mother. She was also the goddess of prosperity, whether it was gold, animals, stature. She was the goddess of the High Kings of Ireland. She was the goddess of every clan father and every clan mother. So it's like, if you look at the top of the chain, the very top two, if I can get the two over here, the top two are Danu and the Dagda. They are at the very top. They are the ones that everything is basically built on. Then you look at where she comes into our cycle of worship. And our cycle of worship, she's involved in everything. I personally involve Danu in every form of ritual, blessing. And matter of fact, before we go at the beginning, but I would just like to kind of get the energy set up for tonight and kind of get a blessing started for you guys. So what we want to do real quick is we want to close our eyes, take a deep breath, and as we exhale, we chant the Ah winds 3 times. May the blessings of mind, body, and spirit be yours. All right, now we continue, and thanks for bearing with me for that. It's always good to get the energy set up for the evening and get set in that right vein. And I'm just going to take a quick minute. We have 35 people sitting in on the class tonight. I want to thank everybody that's here. Leave questions, and I'll answer them at the end of the class. If you want to throw up some loves and some thumbs up, go for it, just so that I know that you're out there and that you're able to hear everything. Can everybody hear me okay? And I'm going to take a drink for everybody out there. And as I was saying, a couple of the main ritual times that are very important to, thank you, I saw that. 2 very important ritual times to include the Great Mother herself in is the summer solstice, which we're getting ready to come up on that here pretty soon. And I can't wait. This winter has just been so crazy that I am definitely ready for, late spring, summertime, that whole kind of vibe, because it's just, I don't know. I don't do well in winter, and here in Missouri, it's just been so rainy and crazy, and now all of this. So it's like, it's just good to get into that time so that we can get out and hopefully do some things. So that's a very important ritual time with Danu, is the summer solstice. And also, after that is very important is Lughnasadh. She ties in with various aspects of Lu himself at that time. And what we're going to do sometime down the line is we are going to talk about ritual. And we'll talk about ritual that are high days. We'll talk about ritual that is tied to various times of the year. And so what I'm giving you here are the major ones. And this just gives you also ideas of, with this, if you look at this on the playback, once we get it up on YouTube, it can kind of give you ideas of things that you want to do for your own personal ritual, which is good because, that's one thing that I personally like to do is design and, make rituals that are very much tied into the gods, in their aspects at various times of the year. Some people will use stuff from books, but mostly I try to write them from, here as much as possible. Every so often I will find a ritual that is traditional or something that has historic validity that I try to use. But, if you can, then by all means, try to write it, because I have the bard in me in a little bit of a way. I love to do poetry and things like that. So it's like that all kind of ties together. So we've got that, and a couple of the things that are magical that are tied to Danu are, she is a goddess for those that are pregnant. She is a goddess that precedes the ripening of fruits and grains and any kind of vegetation in the world that is coming up from a seed and coming into its time of flourishing. Danu is very important for that. And also because of the fact that the Celtic people were very much people that were tied to their hearth and their home as tribes, Danu was very much tied to stability. nothing that would, stability in that things wouldn't be rocked within the tribe, that would not be rocked within your home. That could be the death of a family member. It could be scandal. It could be anything. And whenever you have that tie to Danu, it's like she was the one that kept the boat from rocking, the one that kept the magic in your dwelling at a level that was, the right way to be. And that's why another thing is, I recommend for anybody that wants to, people saying, well, you're talking about the gods, but how do I, make this practical? One thing that you can do that's simple, you don't need to spend a whole lot of money. Find a candle that you like, and every day, at some point or another, light that candle and make a connection to a god or to the gods. Say, Dagda, I thank you for letting me get through this day in one piece. Talk to him for a minute, maybe say a poem, then go sit, relax, have a drink, relax, and think about the gods that you're wanting to focus on that day. And also, one thing you can do during these times that you have the candles lit is to concentrate on the aspects of what that god is and where they sit in the fabric of the pantheon itself and how it pertains to you. That's the one thing, is like with Druidry and pantheist expression in general, is very personal. It's something that you can make tied into your own spirit and to how you want to live your life in this incarnation before you move to the next. So that's just one way. There are ways that are a little bit more advanced, but something that anybody can do is just acknowledging the gods that they're in your life, lighting a candle and saying, hey, I want to connect with you. Also, if you want to, you can go on the computer and print off various images of the gods and what the artists have envisioned what they look like, and maybe laminate them or just put them in frames. And at various times of the week or various days, just take them out and put them on your altar or a shelf somewhere where they're prominent, and give your home the blessing of that god for the day. Let that god be the god that watches over you from sunrise to sunset, and then the next day you do it with another one. It's the same way with divination. You start with one thing one day and you work on the next, and when you do, you get more in tune with them. The same way people that work with spirit guides and other things, paranormal activities, that's stuff that you can do that makes just learning about the gods more real. And once we get into the book listings that we're going to do whenever we have our show on books that are pertaining to Druidry, there's a bunch of them that have lore and stories and things about the gods that you can apply to your life and your situation and help you to learn and grow in your path of Druidry, whether it's a bard or whatever. Everything kind of goes together that way. So we talked about Dagda and Danu. We're going to move into some of the not necessarily under gods, but gods that are kind of spread out in like a timeline. And the next one we're going to talk about is Brigid, or the Irish pronunciation is Breed. And she is a goddess of smithing, poetry, and healing. And the thing that I think that's very cool is that she is tied to a bunch of traditions, Christian and pagan. But the idea of smithing, which is smithcraft, making weapons and things like that. And there's always somebody within a tribe that was good at making swords and shields and all these other things. So it was very cool that they had a goddess that was good with that. Also, you have her bardic aspects in that she was a goddess of poetry. And I love poetry. I don't know how many of you have written poetry over your lifetime. I've written a lot, and I find that, now that I am within a Druidic tradition, looking back before I ever knew what paganism and Druidry was, I think a lot of the poems that I wrote were inspired by Bridget because of the fact that, you know, I don't know if you've ever sat back and just had an idea for something as far as even a poem goes, and you just start writing and writing and writing and writing, and then, you know, you're not really paying attention, and then when you pick up the pen and you get done and you read it, it just blows your mind. I've had poems that, you know, people have looked at me and go, "You really wrote that?" I go, "Yeah," and it's not plagiarized. You can look on the web and see that, you know, this is something that I wrote. But that's inspiration, which we'll talk about that in another class. That's Awen. That's the inspiration that, you know, drives our life, and Bridget is a part of that. And healing. The one thing that, if you notice that in Druidry, a lot of times people say that there isn't necessarily a lot tied to healing except for the idea of the ovate seers, which the ovates are the ones that work with herbs and things like that. So they do have the knowledge of healing. But it seems like that there are other pantheons and other traditions, like in Wicca itself, there does tend to be a lot bigger focus on healing modalities than there is in Druidry, and I kind of like to change that. But, you know, finding out the specifics, because other than just a few things that were herbal treatises and things that were brought through the years, there's not really a whole lot known about quote-unquote Druidic healing practices. There's very little. So I think that's something that we have to develop and look at, you know, the things that work as healing modalities for us today, that can be tied to it. But it's good to have this goddess because of the fact that whenever we don't know what to do, whenever our family's sick, or when we're sick, or, you know, just even just our mental faculties are not. Let me see. What are your thoughts on Lilith? She's a goddess of fertility and agriculture. I don't tend to deal with Lilith because Lilith is a Christian construct. Lilith was supposedly the goddess that was with Adam before Eve, and since that's a Christian thing, I don't have any, you know, I mean, I don't say that there's no reality to that, but for me, it's something as a Druid, that's not in my wheelhouse. I don't have any, you know, yeses on one side or no's. It's just like that's something I don't deal with. But thanks for the question, and it shows that people are actually able to get through on this. So if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and put them through if you can. I know that the internet can be a pain. Luckily tonight, my internet's being decent and functional. Also with Bridget is also, she's the bringer of the light, which is the three rays, the Awen itself. And a lot of times we get so weighted down with darkness from everything that's going on, whether it's breakups or family tragedies or job losses or whatever, that I think Bridget is a good goddess for mental health. If you have issues that make you depressed or whatever, light a candle and, you know, work with Bridget and ask her to kind of lift that fog, kind of move that darkness to the side, and let things come through that are beneficial to your life. There's nothing, you know, a lot of people say that pagans, whenever we do magic, all we're trying to do is get rich and, you know, find the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow and all these other things. But sometimes we're not doing magic for that. We have other reasons too. You know, we're not always, selfish like that. But sometimes it's not wrong to be selfish whenever you are so just pulled down by the weight of everything in the world. When you need to work magic for yourself, don't be afraid to do it, because you might be surprised with the results that you get and how it can affect and uplift your situation. So sometimes whenever you need healing in your mind, it's a good idea to say, Bridget, help me out. You know, I need a little boost in my situation. And with what's going on right now, I ask Bridget stuff all day long almost. Not just for me, but for my mom and other members of my family. So she's going to be hearing from me a lot until, you know, things kind of level out. Also, she is tied to some various and sundry feasts, holy days, and the two big ones for Bridget are Imbolc, which of course, that's one of my favorites because that's whenever things are finally starting to come out of winter and we're just getting ready to move into springtime. And so Imbolc for me, and I'm also one of these people, that you have these twice a year pagans, the ones that are only around for, well, actually three times a year pagans. They're only around for Beltane, Samhain, and maybe Midsummer, or or something like that. But the rest of the time, it's like they don't really pay attention. I'm one of those that I kind of give credence to everything. Every part of the wheel of the year is just as important as the big ones. I mean, those may be the times of the year that the media gives the most attention, but because the media gives the most attention doesn't mean that that there isn't something else out there besides Samhain. How many times have you gone on the TV and seen the Druids carried turnips and lighted turnips and all this stuff, which is things that they did do, but there's more traditions than just Samhain. There's more traditions than just Beltane and stuff like that. So every part of the wheel, for me anyway, is just as important. The other one that is very important for Bridget is Yule, or winter solstice. If you've ever seen the Bridget artworks with her with the halo crown with the candles in it, that's the representation of the return of the light. The light is getting ready to return in the spring. So she's very important at that time too. And that's one of my favorite images of her also, which I think that's one of the classic ones that everybody has seen at some point or another. And some of the magic that she is tied to is especially, excuse me, during the month, for those of us that are tied to lunar celebrations, she is tied to anything that waxes. So that means the days up to and on the full moon itself. Bridget is a goddess of that time, and also the 3 days. The full moon is the 3 days before, the day of, and the 3 days after is the energy period of a full moon, and then you start to move back towards the new moon, which is the dark of the night and things like that. But she is tied to the waxing of that. Also, just like I said before, she is the patron of bards, those who sing songs, those who write poetry, that whole vibe. Also, she is the goddess of inspiration. Anything that causes you to want to stick your feet over the edge of the bed and get up in the morning and sing and sculpt, and even mathematicians and scientists and stuff. I believe that Bridget inspires anybody that has creativity that comes out of their mind. It's called the fire in the head. She gives us the fire in the head. It is our inspiration. Next, we talk about Angus Og. And Angus is one of the more important younger gods. He is the young sun. Men are also another thing, just distinguishing. Males tend to be considered on the sun side in Celtic tradition and Irish tradition. Also, women tend to be on the lunar side. But one thing that a lot of people don't realize is there are pagan traditions that are geared towards a solar calendar, but for the most part, not 100%, but for the most part, Irish and Celtic tradition is lunar. It goes by moon cycles, which we'll get into that in another class. There's a lot that really goes with that. But for the most part, it's not 100%, but there are parts that are mostly that way. And Angus is also the god of love. We've just got through having February 14th, Valentine's Day. And as far as being tied to St. Valentine and the Catholic thing, I think it's also worthy of Angus Day, not just putting it down that you're giving credence to St. Valentine, But on a day of love, then as far as it being a Celt, a Druid, an Irish spirituality practitioner, it's a good day to work with him in your love situation. As far as that goes, I tend to be one of those people that I don't believe, even as you have the Wiccan side of and it harm none, do what you will, or karma going out, doing 3 times the bad and things like that. Well, there is a degree for that in Druidic spirituality a little bit, but my thing is it's just set period is that you get back what you send out. If you send out bad, you're going to get back bad. If you send out good, you're going to get good. But in that vein of the idea of love spells and things like that, I don't believe in doing love spells to attract a specific person, but I do believe in attracting love to your area, to your energy, to your region, so that you can have the chance to connect with something or someone that may or may not be the person that you are going to be in love with. And that kind of gives you a buffer for not messing with somebody's free will, because I'm a big believer that you go against what somebody else wants, you're being selfish. You don't give them a chance to be who they want to be, to do what they want to do. But if those forces are just to bring you together into a space where there's possibilities, then there's nothing wrong with that, But if you say, I want John Smith or Susie Johnson to fall in love with me, you're just asking for trouble. So definitely this is a God that can be worked with in that vein of, whenever you want to see about finding a way to find yourself in a relationship of some form. His specific times are he's mostly tied to Imbolc and the spring equinox, and also he's also loosely tied to events that happen over our childhood and moving into adulthood. So in other words, when a boy becomes a man, goes on his first hunt, makes his first kill in a battle, when a young woman starts her menses, becomes able to have children, that whole 9 yards. So he is loosely tied in that, but he is mostly tied in those earlier aspects, the youth, before you start to get into actual adulthood, whatever age that would be. So he is more tied to youth, the youthful aspects of people in the tribe. Next, we're going to move to Boan. And Boan is a cattle and water goddess. And for us in the world, she is what is known as the bringer of the rain. Whenever you're out there and you're getting pelted and everything, that's Boan. She brings the rains that fill the creeks, that fill the river, that fill the dry riverbeds, that fill the oceans and stuff. So she's very important. That rain that brings fresh water to us, to the earth and everything's very important, because without water, without fresh water, we would not survive as long as we have. So Boan is a very important goddess in that aspect. Her specific times that is more pertinent than any others are the spring equinox and Beltane. And she is also tied to fertility. She is tied to love. She's tied to rain itself, and water signs tend to be seekers of knowledge. That's why a lot of times you have a lot of water signs that gravitate towards the bardic arts, or that also gravitate towards the seer ovate, because there's always so much that they want to learn. Their hunger for learning and knowledge and information is stoked by that process. And so Boan is very important with that. And then you have I think one of the pillars in the middle that kind of balances out the entire pantheon and is also tied more so to the Dagda and Danu, is Bile. If you ever look at certain books that show Druidic ritual areas, whenever we do ritual, there are times whenever you're going to have what's known as the axis mundi, the line that goes directly through the middle of the earth, which is believed in Ireland that the axis mundi goes right through the center of Ireland itself. And the name of the axis mundi is also called the world tree, or the Bile. Also, Bile is a god. And Bile is the god of life and death and the rising sun. The function of Bile is transformation. Anything that takes us from one state to the next, whether it's life to death, happiness to sadness, to rich, poor, the whole 9 yards. That transformation, that change that comes in all kinds of forms through our life, that is the transformation that is brought by Bile. His main ritual times during the year are Beltane and the summer solstice. Beltane because we're moving into the transformation of the raw, snowy, cold, bitter of winter, and moving into the transformative of flowers blooming, critters coming out, animals just being all over the place. So there's that transformation. And then you have on the other side, at summer solstice, you're starting to see that change of the longest day. And then once you get from summer solstice and move onwards away towards Samhain, you start to see that decline in the transformation as we move to shorter days and getting ready for the new year that is going to be coming, that we recognize at Samhain. So Bile is very instrumental in that. So he's tied to fertility, growth, change, and strength of mind, strength of body, transforming yourself from a 97-pound weakling to Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's Bile. If you are a physical enthusiast, if you like to run, to bike, to do exercise, if you have an exercise program and you want to transform your body, if you want to feel better about yourself, then you can maybe make a charm or something that you can take with you on these endeavors to, a charm of Bile to kind of help you in your own personal transformation, which I think is very cool. All right. I'm going to take a drink. I hope everybody is having a good night. And holy crap, we've got 75 people here for class tonight. I want to thank you guys that were here for the last class. I want to thank everybody that was here for the Druid meditation, for healing and peace. We're going to be doing all kinds of things throughout this, because as long as I'm on lockdown, I've got plenty of time and plenty of stuff that I think that we can share together. And I hope that it's informational and can help you, because there's a lot of people here that have been involved in Druidic tradition for a long time. And that's one thing I'll say right now, is everything that I'm telling you, excuse me, is my aspect, the way that I see it. But what I'm doing with these classes specifically is giving you bits and nuggets and things that you can use to get you started, to figure out where you want to land in this. Do you want to follow the Bardic path? Do you want to follow the path of the Druid itself in ritual and leading ritual practices for people, or the Seer Ovates with healing and divination and things like that? It depends, because it depends on what you feel your specialties are, what you feel comfortable with, what you want to start. But there's always those different degrees of ability. And so it's good to have a class, to have a time where we can come together and talk. And this right here kind of can give you ideas about where you fit in the whole landscape of what New Pagan Druidry is. And I think it's very important, because we are the ones, I believe we are the ones that are going to keep people and get them stabilized, not just ourselves, but them. And then once we get out of this situation, I think we can be the ones that are going to help bring the earth back to a bigger place of balance. I think we need to be a little bit more proactive about doing things that are outside of our house, out there in the world to help each other and to help the animals and everything, because it's like this is a wake-up call showing us that, you know, it's time that we put what we think and what we practice into action, because if not, it's like grinding your wheels. And so that's why I'm going to keep doing this, and I appreciate everybody that is here tonight, because, you know, it's just a little bit, you know, just me sharing with you, but it can go a long way. You never know how this is going to influence somebody, and I just want to thank everybody that's here so far. So we're going to continue. We're going to move on to the next god in the crew here, and that is Lu. It's spelled L-U-G-H, and I think a lot of us have an idea of Lu from various traditions. You know, Lughnasadh, the ritual, and he is known as the Master of Arts and the Sun God. Lu is Lu of the long arm. Lu was one that in the Mabinogion he had came to a castle, and they said, "You can't come in." And he goes, "Why can't I come in?" He goes, "We're looking for somebody with a certain talent." And they asked him, "What are your talents?" And he told them what his talents were. And he goes, "Well, we need certain things to be able to be done, and you can't do it. So until you can do it, you can't come in." So Lu left, and he went and learned to do that thing, and he came back. And every time he came back to that castle, he tried to get in, and they kept not letting him in, because they said, "Well, we need somebody that can do this." And he eventually did this a certain number of times, and then he came back, and he goes, "I am Lu Samoldanik, the master of all arts. I know all things." He was a jack of all trades, master of none more than likely, but he knew a little bit about everything, and they finally let him in. And so anybody that is, if you're one of those people that likes to know a little bit of everything, Lu is the god that kind of can influence you, whether you like to play guitar and study anthropology and like early childhood development. Who knows what it is, what your interests are. But whenever you're working with a god to kind of help you foster those, Lu is one of those that you would most likely want to try working with. He's also the owner of the Spear of Lu, one of the sacred artifacts of the land of Ireland itself, and it was his chosen weapon. Excuse me. And the times that he is most venerated and given credence are, of course, Lughnasadh, and also the fall equinox, which is Mabon. He is tied to the first harvest, artistic endeavors. If you're an artist, if you're a painter, and things like that, that was one thing that he's tied to. He's also athletic. Anybody that is into football, weightlifting, basketball, any kind of sport, he's tied to that. Holy crap, we're at 85. Good to have everybody here. So he's tied to sports. Also, Lughnasadh is a sun festival. So he's also tied to any festival that is a fire festival or a sun festival. He can be included in that situation. Then we come to the big one. This is one of my favorites. This is one of the goddesses that I work with the most outside of Danu. And I think this is one that everybody kind of leans towards a little bit, especially if you're one of those people that have a strong will and a very forceful personality. The next one we're going to be talking about is the Morrigan. And she is the goddess of war and death. She is a mother of chaos. She is a bringer of endings. As far as her aspects as a war goddess, it was said that she did not delight in war. It's just she knew that it was her lot in her existence as a goddess. But she never shirked from any battle. She sent her, those that worshipped her, that went into battle, had her blessing. But also at the same time, it was her that at the end of your life, when you were in a battle and you succumbed to death, she was the one that had the ravens come to take your soul to the other world, or Tirnanog, which we'll deal with the other world in another class. So the Morrigan, for us, because of the cycle of life that we have, birth, life, and death, we are eventually all going to meet the Morrigan in our own way. So she is very, very important and very pivotal in pagan existence for those of us that follow the Irish traditions. She is mostly tied to Samhain, which we know, the time when the veil is thinnest between this world and the other world, and also the fall equinox. Surprisingly, the Morrigan is tied to winning of arguments. So if you're arguing with your husband and stuff and you want to maybe put a one-up on him while you're in the middle of that situation, maybe say a little silent prayer to the Morrigan, and who knows how that argument will turn out. But yes, she's tied to the winning of arguments. Also, she is tied to the processes of death, not just death itself, but what comes before, during, and after one's ending of existence on this plane. And she can't be, you can't have the dealing of death without having the dealing of rebirth. So the Morrigan is also not a great aspect of rebirth, but she is. Also, she's part of the triplicity of Morrigan, Danu, and Bab, the triplicity of the goddesses. That's one of the main ones for the Irish pantheon. There are other Celtic pantheons that have their own triplicities, but this is the one. There's another one that involves Morrigan, Bridget, and Danu. So we have that. That's the Morrigan side of things. Then we move into the last of the gods. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The next is Goibniu, or in Welsh he's known as Govanen, and he is the smith god. He is the one that makes that made Undri for Dagda, that repairs the Spear of Lu, that makes all these things that are otherworldly for the gods, and gave us the ability to create things with the power of the smith and the anvil and the hammer and the oar and all these things. So Goibniu is very important for that smith aspect, and also for the making of mead and ale. He is the god of brewers. And there's a very specific ritual that is tied to him that's called the Feast of Age. And sometime in the future, I'm going to do some solitary, demonstrations of certain rituals. And there's certain ones that I can't do that I don't really want to share. But the Feast of Age is something that is for anybody that brews mead or makes beer, and are hands-on craftsman type people with wood and things like that. There's a ritual that is tied to him. He is the patron of craftsmen, and believe it or not, with the Irish and stuff, he is kind of like a forerunner of the god of unions, trade unions. There are unions in Ireland that have used Goibniu as one of their symbols. Because most union buildings have some kind of symbol that shows who they are and what their local number is. Well, this unions started to a degree in Ireland itself. So Goibniu is a god tied to trade unions. All right, next is another very important god that a lot of people can deal with because of the fact that we have earth signs, air signs, water signs, that whole dichotomy for astrology. Well, the next one in line for this is Manannán mac Lir. He is a god of the headlands and the son of the sea. And he is the one at Samhain that whenever we are making our pleas to the ancestors to come forward and be with us that night, whether it's through tarot cards or working with the crystal ball or working with the Ogham or whatever, it is Manannán that splits the veil and allows that to happen, to allows us to connect with the other world at that time at Samhain. So he is the keeper of the gate. He is the keeper of the door. He is the one that sets his boat to go out across the sea, to go beyond the ninth wave and into Tirnanog. So he's very important. And because of him being the one that kind of is the bridge between this world and the next, he is important in all rituals. That's why if you have something that ties to water, always have something water-based or water-accented on your ritual, whether it's a seashell or a glass of water or something like that. It's good to have those kind of elements on your altar, or whenever you're outside working in ritual. You can have a cauldron filled with water or whatever, but it's very important to kind of have that tied into things. And he is also tied into death and rebirth, our ancestors. He is the patron of merchants, anybody that buys and sells. Also, those who are Marines, sailing Marines, fighting sailors that are everywhere on the world. If you are Navy or whatever, Mananan is a god of sailors and those that are naval. Next, we have Dian Kecht, and that's D-I-A-N-C-E-C-H-T, and he is the physician of the gods. He is one of the ones that kind of brought the practice of herbal healing to the seers, the Ovates, as they were learning over time what plants were beneficial on the Irish island itself, learning of various mosses and various things that grew around certain trees that helped people. Like, what is it? Aspirin comes from a tree. And so that kind of thing. So he was very important as a physician for healing. He was the giver of all healings to men and women on the isle itself. And whenever somebody says sláinte to your health, they're kind of making a little bit of giving a little bit of a nod to Dian Kecht himself. So that is, he's basically everything that deals with the healing aspects of our practices, which I think that's something that over time now, because we're in the modern age, that we definitely could add to that, make it more advanced, because there's things that we are borrowing from other traditions that I think we need to come up with things that are specifically geared towards Druidic practice. Next, we talk about Nuada. Nuada was the chieftain of the gods. And holy crap, we're at 100. Good to see everybody here. I hope you guys are having a good night. We've got more people. Feel free to leave comments, questions, thumbs up, loves. I'm so glad everybody's here. I hope you guys are having a great night. We're going to continue, but I just had to give a look over, and it's like, oh my gosh, we've got a lot of people here tonight. I'm very appreciative of everyone that's here tonight. Thank you very much. He was a ruler. He was a god that kind of kept everything in line for the Dagda and for Danu. He's kind of like, if you've ever been in a club and there was that sergeant of arms guy that, was standing there with his arms crossed, it just kind of kept everything the way it's supposed to be. Well, that's who Nuada is. He's basically the sergeant at arms of the gods. He was a god that dealt with whenever there were squabbles between Druidic clans, one clan to the other, one high king to another. He would be the god that would influence a druid to go to in between these groups and settle their beef, to kind of get them to calm things down for the good of their king and things like that. So he was very much tied to anything that was a political situation, political matters, even at that time. Also, it was said that with him being a chieftain of the gods, that whenever he was in battle, his sword, you could never escape it. You could run as far as you wanted, but when he made that stroke to take you down, he never missed, ever. If he wanted to end you, his sword would do the job. So he was considered very powerful in those aspects, as his role of chieftain, that underlying character that kept everything in line for the gods. Got just a couple more. Then we have Ogma, where we get the Ogham, which is Ogham. A lot of you know that for the most part, our background of what we know about Druidry comes from Roman authors, Pliny, Plato. God, my nose is itching. Excuse me. So as far as the Celts having anything real written down for them, they didn't necessarily have that. What they did have, though, was the Ogham script. And the Ogham script, for the most part, was used for two purposes. We've added the divinatory meanings over the years, but for them, it was mainly posts that were set up in various parts of their territory, and they use it as boundary markers. Even within their territories, those that had sheep, cattle, fields, and other things would mark those boundaries with Ogham. And what it was a post that was upright, and on the corners there would be things that were slits that were done down the side in different patterns, and those denoted who you were. And sometimes they might have said something like, stay away, this is the clan that owns this area, that whole 9 yards. So it was kind of like a warning system for the most part. And then later on, it became more of an alphabet until they started to read and write and things later on in later centuries. But the divinatory aspects of it wasn't really added until modern times. Modern times being in like anything from like 1200 on. So it's like, but still, it's very important. And for us today, we have the Ogham itself to work with in ritual, to work with as a divinatory tool, and we're going to have a whole class devoted to that. And it's fascinating. I think it's one of the most fascinating things about Druidic practice is the idea of how these things that just look like scribbles, and most language and writing is scribbles, but just the way that this looks, and then you kind of and take the meaning in, and it's, I don't know, it's very transformative. It's very cool. And I think that's one of the things that I like to study the most is the meaning of the what the Ogham can tell us whenever we cast it, whenever we work with it, what we can learn. So that is very important. He was also a god of knowledge and literature. So for the bards, anybody that wrote stories, wrote long form stories later on, or could tell long form stories around the campfire and stuff, Ogma was very important for them. And then anybody, any practitioner of any art that seeked knowledge, Ogma was a god of libraries, an early god of the idea of books and things like that. So Ogma is very important in that aspect. He was the developer. It was said that Ogma sent the Ogham to us. That gave us the idea of later on for divination itself. He was also, believe it or not, he was a champion of the gods. Sometimes there are stories where other gods from other pantheons had tried to invade or whatever, and it is said that Ogma was the one that was sent forth to kind of say, okay, I'll be the guy that takes you on for this situation and stuff. So he was very much kind of like an Arnold Schwarzenegger action figure kind of guy that would take care of business whenever he needed to. He was knowledgeable, but he was strong, very strong also. And then we come to the last one that we're going to talk about tonight, and that is Ermit. And Ermit is a goddess of medicine, once again, for those that are tied to the healing arts. And I know there's a lot of you out there that are, working with crystals, working with herbs, working with tinctures and things like that, and are very good at that. So Ermit is another goddess that you might want to look into, look at her history and her lore, and see how you can add that to your practice. Everything here, every god and goddess that we talked about tonight, you can add individually, but there are things that you can do, bringing them together as a whole. There are rituals that you can do that involve the entire pantheon, and we'll talk about those on another time. But she is also related to Dian Kect in a way Not even though she is part of the pantheon, it's not like they're related as being brother and sister or anything, but just in their practice and what they do. So it's like having two doctors in the house in just different modalities. Um, and her main thing, like I say, she is the goddess of herbal healing. So if you have an herb altar, which there I've known people that have some really cool herb altars, you can take and put images of her on that altar and kind of make her your goddess of herbal healing and herbal work. Um, having gone through all of the gods of the Tuatha, it's important, I think, that we don't put them on a shelf, that we take the time to work with them, because it's like sometimes we need inspiration in life. And if we just keep going and chugging along and nothing seems to come together, I think that the energy that we get from working with the pantheon, with working with the gods, whether it's in meditation or divination or spell work or whatever it is that we do, it gives us a boost, and it gives us the chance to learn and feel like we're accomplishing something. Because some people have said, well, I'm afraid to do ritual because I never do ritual the right way, so I never feel like I'm progressing. There are times when you're going to feel like ritual doesn't work the way you want it to, but just because you fall off the horse one time, try it different. Don't always try to do the same thing over and over again. Change things up. If working with one god or goddess kind of feels like the door's been shut in your face, then work with another one. See which ones are the ones that resonate with your spirit, resonate with your mind, resonate with the situation in your life at the time, and then go from there. And it's like, don't be afraid to change it up. That's the one thing. It's like, there are times when ritual can be intimidating, but even then, sometimes rituals don't have to be long, drawn-out affairs. They can be simple as, like I said at the beginning of the evening, where you just light a candle and you talk to them. You let them know what your situation is, how you feel about things. You can do that with the Dagda, you can do that with Danu, you can do that with anybody. And I think once you start that process, it gives you confidence. It gives you better ability. And it gives you a, how would I say, it gives you the idea to keep going, that you want to learn more, that you want to know more. And that's why these classes are coming out the way they are, is that I want to kind of give you guys guideposts and signs that can give you just, I'm not going to give you everything super deep. There will be classes later on that will go into deeper topics. But for right now, every class that we do is going to be like a signpost, something that you can look at and go, okay, well, this is what I know now. How can I utilize that? That's why we did the last class. That's why we did the meditation for healing and peace. Sometimes we just need to, close our eyes and just go to a place that isn't here and do the things that we need to do. So this class is like, this second class is the foundation. The gods are our foundation. The gods are the foundation of paganism, not just the ideas of nature, not just the ideas of fertility and all that, but I think for the most part, the gods of any tradition, whether it's Viking or Druidic or whatever, that is your bedrock and your stone to set things upon and to go forward. So having said that, we got two things. Well, actually, we've got three things coming up. Okay, first off, today is Thursday, so I'm thinking of Sunday evening for maybe an hour or so. What I'm going to do is what I call the Druid bookshelf. I'm going to get all my books, and we're going to talk for a little while and give you the basic stuff that you can find at Amazon or any occult bookseller or whatever, and you can start ordering some of these. You don't have to get them all, but start with the ones that interest you. And we're going to talk about the books that are the most beneficial, and then the others that are must-haves for any library. And then there's a bunch of books that I don't have, so we're going to talk about stuff that I recommend, because everybody's wanting a list. And what you can do is once we put that video, all of the videos that we do are going to be converted and put up on my YouTube channel, which is A Pagan Perspective on youtube.com. Feel free to join the channel, subscribe, and we've got a bunch of stuff. We've got the last class there. We've also got the Druid meditation, plus some stuff from way back that are pretty cool. We've got a hymn to the Morgan from Samhain in 2013 and some other things up there. So there's some really cool pagan stuff on my channel. But so we're going to do that on Sunday. And then our next class is going to be next Thursday. And next Thursday, we're going to move on to the next point. A lot of people go, okay, so I want to be a Druid, Bard, or a Ovate Seer. And then I've just learned about where the gods come into some of this. So the next thing that would be the next progression is what are some of the Druidic concepts that are the basis for the Druid spirituality in its own self. So we've got some that we're going to be talking about are the idea of the ancestors. We're going to be talking about the idea of the Awen and what it is. We're going to be talking about the other world. We're going to be talking about the idea of how Druids look at death and reincarnation and things like that, and a bunch of other stuff that night. So it's going to be like that next part of the brick that builds your altar, that builds your foundation. We're going to be talking about that. And then just a little bit of a side note, we were here in Springfield going to be on May 2nd. We're going to be doing Beltane in the Park 2020. This would be our 4th year in a row, and it's a time that we would get together for potluck and ritual. And currently we have 178 people interested in coming, but because of being on a shelter-in-place order up until the 29th of March, the 29th of April, I don't think that we're going to be able to hold that. And so what I've done is I've gone into that events listing and I changed it to, we're still going to hold Beltane, but we're not going to be doing it at Beltane in the Park. What we're going to do is we're going to come here to Druid School, and we're going to have Beltane live here on Facebook. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a mini potluck. And what that means is I'm going to sit here and we're just going to talk and bullshit and just have a good little potluck and maybe sing some songs for a little bit. And then I'm going to bring up the altar and we're going to have a ritual, Beltane ritual. And this year's theme for the ritual is fairies at twilight. Fairies are important in Druidic ritual, and over the years a lot of people haven't really included them in that situation. There's a lot of rituals, but very few that are inclusive of the fairies in it. And I think it's time that we start honoring the spirits of the earth. I think the spirits of the earth are the things that are going to start to heal us. So in that respect, that's why we're going to be working with them. I've got everything set up for the altar. It's going to be beautiful. I think you guys will like it. So for those of you that are watching and listening now, as we get closer to it, there's going to be announcements and things like that. But I invite you to join us for that. Fix yourself a meal, light some candles, put on your robes, and we will go from there and just have a great time at Beltane. Then we'll see what goes on between then. But so we're going to keep this going. And holy crap, we've got 125 people here. Thank you guys so much. So if you've liked everything tonight, if you have any questions before I go ahead and throw them up here on the screen. Give me thumbs up, loves, let me know that you enjoyed it, and that everyone that's here is invited to the next one. And what I'm going to do is, after this is finished, it's going to take about an hour, maybe an hour and a half for this to process. And then I'm going to place it on the YouTube channel so that you guys can view it back and share it with your friends and things. Thank you. I appreciate that. I've seen that. Thank you very much. So I'm going to kind of end this with the way that we did just a little bit earlier. And what I want everybody to do is just kind of sit back, breathe deep in through your nose and out through your mouth. And we're going to chant the Awen 3 times just to kind of close out this class and just let everybody have a good nice deep feeling of, you know, connection when this is finished. So we're going to breathe in. Blessings of the old gods to everybody. I appreciate this. Share this with your friends. And if you have any questions, also, if you have any questions, feel free to friend me, to message me. And if I can't answer a question, I'll do the best I can to point you in the right direction. You know, because there's some things that I may not know about that I might have an idea to, you know, push you off to something that can help. But feel free, if you have any questions and you want to know more, you know, go ahead and friend me and I'll do the best I can. Also, if you're out there and you're not in the group, I encourage you to come on in and join us on Missouri Druid School here on Facebook. We've got a lot of really cool people that are coming in, a lot of people from different orders and different groups around the country that are sharing their wisdom and their love with you and each other every day. And I think that is so awesome. We're a brotherhood, and we're going to keep this going. We are going to get through this situation in one piece together and with the help of the gods. So having said that, I hope you all have a great night. Look forward to the next class, and I will put up all that info. And what I think we're going to do as far as the Druid library, the Druid book thing, we're going to do that Sunday. We'll take like an hour and just sit down and talk about what's good and what's not, and where you can start and all that good stuff. So have a great night, y'all, and I will see you next time.